Unmute. Wait.
And good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Q&A session for the Art Business Academy and Art Business Insider. Today is Friday, January 10th, 2025, and our first broadcast of the new year. And as I mentioned prior to the end of the year in our last live Q&A session, today we are going to be looking over and reviewing some of the art sales results, specifically what we've seen at Xanadu Gallery over the last 12 months. And of course, it's interesting to see those numbers. And I like to do these sessions for a couple of reasons. One is that it gives us an opportunity, it gives you an opportunity to peek into the gallery world from the other side and kind of see what's happening there. It gives you a sense of some of the trends that we're seeing, although we have to be cautious in extrapolating too much from these trends, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go along. Um, and then obviously we want to be able to use this information to your benefit. What can you learn from what we're seeing in sales and what we're doing, more importantly, that can help you in your own art business. And so that is kind of the purpose in doing this. Now, the side benefit for me in having this session each year is that it gives me some time to do a deep dive into our numbers, which is always good to do. And I recommend that all of us get in the habit and the practice of doing look backs where it doesn't have to be at the end of the year. It could be a monthly look back or a quarterly or 6 month, whatever it is that works best for you. But there is some real value in diving into the metrics that matter to you and looking at them in an objective way. I don't know about you, but my experience is that I end up getting very caught up in the moment and what's happening day to day. And if I'm having a good day, it seems like life is good and everything is great. If I'm having a bad day, it seems like the world is coming to an end, and it's easy to project that onto kind of our broader outlook. And if we can stop and objectively look at the numbers, it can help us be more realistic about what we've accomplished, and I feel can help me and hopefully help us set our plans in a more realistic way and work more effectively as we're trying to achieve our goals. And so, with that, I want to dive into the numbers, and I'm going to be throwing a lot of charts and graphs and numbers at you. But I will be leaving time for you to ask questions and ask for kind of a deeper dive on what we're seeing. And we're going to have a discussion on kind of some of the implications as well. I'm going to, this will be another session where at the end, I'm going to export a PDF of the slideshow so that you can go back to it and look at the numbers and graphs more closely. So don't panic if I'm moving a little bit quickly through something and you don't see all of those details. Okay, so first, I want to start by showing a graphic that I broadcast in this same session exactly a year ago. It was actually really a year and a couple of weeks because we did it right before the end of the year last time. But this was our sales chart. Let me pull it up here. Oh, hold on. Here we go. So this is what the sales chart looked like at the end of last year. You can go back to that broadcast and you might see a little note of disappointment that, as a business owner, we always want to see this kind of chart going up and to the right. We want this year's sales to have beat last year's. We want to be moving in the right direction. And obviously, what you see here as we go to 2022 to 2023, it's headed in a downward direction, not something that you want to see. And we talked a little bit about some of the reasons that that might have been happening, but I'm just going to throw it out to those of you here in the session. If you had to kind of just guess what the chart might look like when I add 2024 into it, based on maybe your own experiences, maybe based on what you're seeing in the news, based on what you're hearing from other artists in your community, would you anticipate that this year was better than last year, the same, or maybe a little worse than last year? Now, those of you who have been in our sessions over the last several months have heard me mention, spoiler, that things have been going better this year. So I'm not going to hold this back as some kind of big surprise. But I just suspect that if we came into this cold, there would be a tendency for us to expect that trend might have continued, sales going down, right? Because we just are relentlessly pummeled with bad news. Inflation is creeping back up. Yes, the stock market has been up, but it's wobbled the last several weeks. And on and on. The country is on fire. I mean, all kinds of things that could lead you to believe, well, the world is terrible. The sky is falling. What's the point of even getting up in the morning? And it can be challenging to keep a positive outlook with that kind of constant stream of news coming your direction. And last year I showed these headlines and just bringing them back up here. I did some the same kind of internet search that I did last year, trying to look for art trends for this year, and I actually could not find anybody really talking about what's going on this year. I am expecting to have a couple of reports come out here in the next few weeks that will talk about what auction results were like over this last year, which can be a little bit, I think it's a little bit, it's not a direct correlation to our business, but certainly it can give us some indication of what the broader market is looking at. But those were all from last year. Okay, here is this year. And you can see when we add 2024 in that we are seeing that movement back in the right direction, where sales were up. Now, just kind of a recap of some of the ups and downs that we see here. It should come as no surprise, and did come as no surprise, that 2020, the first year kind of leading into the global events, the pandemic and so on, we had a close down during I think it was a 4 to 6 week period during our high season. 2020 was a very challenging year for everyone, and we definitely saw a dip in sales. And then interestingly, 2021, things were still not back to complete normal in the broader economy and in the world, but we saw some, I believe, pent-up demand from folks who maybe hadn't been able to buy as much art, maybe folks who had done some remodeling when they were spending so much time at home. Maybe they got tired of some of the art that they had been seeing, and 2021 ended up being a record-breaking year. And then over the two subsequent years, 22 and 23, things dipped a bit from that, and obviously with all of the things I've already mentioned, inflation and other upheaval in the world, things dipped back down a little bit. And then this last year, we started to climb out of that again. And we're going to see that climb reflected in some of the specifics that we dive into. And we're gonna try and analyze a little bit where the change occurred from 23 to 24, what we were seeing that was different. Okay, so let's dive to the next. Okay, actually, I did want to bring this one up. This was a chart that I just found. This was from ArtNet, and this is a reflection of auction sales. Notice, just take a look at that orange line at the top there, kind of the up, then down, then up, then down, then up. I thought it was interesting that though that shape, that general shape, does reflect a bit what we see here. And so if there is any kind of analog between what's happening in the broader market, in the auction world, perhaps we do see that some of the overall sentiment. Now, having said that, I also have to note that the last year this one shows is 23. And so in some ways, this is a little bit of for me, it's a leading indicator. My sales lag a little bit behind, or the trends lag a little bit behind what the ArtNet database was showing in terms of sales. Okay, also want to just stabilize this out a little bit. If I take our annual sales and instead of looking at them year by year, I average them using a 3-year moving average, generally, we just see the market for us growing and developing, which is what you would expect and hope to see as your business continues to go along, that you're starting to be able to take more and more advantage of relationships that you have, that your buyers are becoming, you're building more goodwill with them and building better sales with them. You're fine-tuning your relationships with your artists. That's also helping your business. And again, just trying to step back, because it is very easy to get caught up and start to catastrophize any downward motion. And instead, I try to be a little bit objective and just say, okay, hopefully everything is generally moving in the right direction. And if not, what can I be doing to offset the movement in the wrong direction? Okay, in terms of, okay, so that is stabilizing it. Now let's go in the other direction and let's look at month-to-month sales in the gallery. This is from 2019 to 2024, and this looks like a lot of chaos. And the only reason I obviously, as a business owner, need to look at something like this is that, and I think this is true for many of you as artists as well, is that if you are in the art business because you're looking for stability, you might be in the wrong spot. And I think the previous charts do kind of smooth things out as you're looking at the bigger picture. But I would say that this chart is more reflective of the emotional experience that you have in this business, where you'll have a great up month and then things dive down and sales drop, and there's just this chaos that goes on. Again, we can look at 2024, which is the kind of turquoise line there, and we can see some, positive movement over many of the months. But even during a good year, there were some months that were just more challenging than others. The other very important thing that this reflects is that my business is very seasonal. And this will be true for many of you as well, depending on the region that you're in, the galleries that you might be showing in, the shows that you participate in. You're going to experience that your cash flow may be very seasonal. And that being the case, boy, I sure have to plan to cover those low points. And for us, it's that June, you can see it there, June, July, August, September. Our long, hot summer in Arizona is very slow for us. And I have alluded to it before that it is very tempting when you're in the March, April, and everything is going great to, head on down to the Maserati dealership and, do things you should not do. And I just would so highly encourage us, as much, maybe more than any other industry, we need to be thinking about building up reserves when times are good to help carry us through when times are more challenging, to just really try and stabilize that spending. And it just came to my mind, and I will show some numbers that reflect this, but what I try to do is keep our spending very stable month to month, as much as that is possible. And so when we're having those great months, that's building up reserves. And during the months when things are a little slower, we're able to then draw from those reserves. Now, I can't quite do that fully because of the way I compensate my staff. They receive a commission on the sales of work. And so when we're in the months with the high level of sales, the payroll, which we're going to see is my biggest expense, just naturally is going to end up being higher. And so there is a bit bigger of an outflow, but all the other discretionary expenses and kind of the outflow, I try to keep as stable as possible throughout the year. To help account for this and to not get myself into trouble during those slower months. Okay, here's a number. Number of days where we didn't sell enough to keep the doors open. In other words, if I were to take my total expenses for the year, divide that by 365, and obviously I'm taking out the artist commission and so on and so forth. There is a number that I have to hit per day in order to keep the doors open, to pay our expenses and keep the business going. And it was interesting. This is the first time I've ever run this calculation and run this report on our data. I would have expected this number to be significantly higher. Again, from my emotional experience day to day, it seems like there are a lot of days where not much is selling, but it actually only ended up being 62 days where the cash register was not ringing enough on those days to reach that minimum. Now, obviously, during the other 300 some odd days, 303 days of the year, there were enough and more than enough to keep the doors open. But I just have to emphasize that even for me, even now 20 some odd years into having the gallery, um, as I look over the last year, I can think of a lot of times where I think, oh boy, it's just not, where are the sales? What's happening? Why didn't we have enough sales today, or even this morning? Why didn't anyone come in and buy anything? And there's this emotional experience where, it might be some kind of PTSD born of all the years where things were really challenging, that you just naturally end up thinking that we're turning the corner and things are going to fall apart on us. And that can be motivating, but it can also be demoralizing to be feeling that way. And so again, it's just good to come back to the actual numbers and try and keep ourselves grounded in reality. Here is our average order value, kind of on a month by month basis. And you can see that our average order throughout the year was $688. But interestingly, again, kind of reflecting somewhat the seasonality of our business, but also just reflecting a few large sales. You see some big jumps in those numbers. And I can point to the June one is kind of interesting because that is going into our off season, but we happen to have one sale of a large bronze sculpture that completely changed the dynamics of that particular month and really helped us be much more stable than we otherwise would have been going into our summer. Again, certainly throws a little bit of a wrench into how we think about cash flow and sales in that, yes, we do have averages and yes, we can kind of count on those averages being somewhat stable over time. But in this business, you can also have one customer come in and completely change the dynamics of what your sales looked like for that month and sometimes even for that whole year. One customer can make a big difference. And we're going to see, I'm going to show you some of those numbers with our customers, some customers who made that kind of difference. Conversely, if you're not having those customers come in, you can really see some dips like we see even in February, July of last year, where our average sale dips down and, in July is even below $500 per sale. Okay, total sales, and then reflecting when that red line are online sales. And, we've been talking quite a bit over the last several years about our efforts to increase our presence on social media, and our efforts to generate more sales online. And what we have seen is that those efforts have had a significant impact on our total business. Last year, we were talking quite a bit about how really our online and social media sales kind of saved the year for us. And we can see that in 2023. Now, interestingly, our sales, the growth we were seeing in social media declined. It wasn't as big a climb as it had been over the previous years. It was still a very important part of our business. But this chart shows a bit of a reflection of the reality of life, in that sometimes you've got a good thing going and another good thing comes along and prevents you from putting as much effort into that first thing that you would like to. And that certainly happened in 2024. In our last year session, one of the things I committed to was that, well, yes, we're going to be kind of doubling down on social media. It's been such an important thing that's been happening for our business that we've got to do more of that. And what ended up happening was that all of our in-gallery sales ended up taking a lot of time and energy and commitment, and I was not able to put as much effort into social media as we had previously. Now, we are going to see that the dollar value of the individual sales we were making through social media increased in 2024. But again, I just wasn't able to build it as much as I might have liked to during the last year. In terms of percentages, and this is reflective of what we just saw, you can see what the total percentage of online sales was of our total sales. And so in 2023, it was almost a third of all of our sales, dollar-wise, was generated through social media. And in 2024, it was 27%, so down a bit in terms of a percentage. But notice the difference between 2020 and 2024, where it had almost been an article of faith for me that when I would be asked, how much of your sales come from online activity and social media, it was just easy for me to say, oh, about 10%, because that was true. And that was just kind of really a no effort on our part. We have a website, we have a social media presence, but we're not proactively trying to generate sales through social media. Well, just having the website meant that that those sales were very steadily about 10% of our total sales. And then the effort and investment we made, really beginning in, it was the end of 2021 and going into 2022, it made a significant difference to start putting that effort forward in terms of seeing the sales. I said that wrong. It was the end of 2022 that we started making the investment and the increase and started to see a big boost. So I will be, again, this was a good reminder to me over this last year. If you had asked me in mid-December, how do your online sales this year compare to last year, I would not have had much intuition about how to answer that question. Yes, we've been having online sales. We had some strong, higher value online sales, but I would not have known kind of where the level was compared to the previous year. And now I know, slightly more in terms of dollar value, slightly less in terms of the total percentage of sales. And I need to recommit to increasing the efforts there again. Now, kind of building on that, this is the conversion rate, how many visitors had to hit our website in order to generate a sale. And like I say, this is reflective of the overall trends we were seeing, in that if you look at the first column, the total number of user sessions on our website. So this isn't exactly the number of users, because one customer could visit your site several times, and each of those sessions would be recorded. Session is basically any visits that a user makes in a 24-hour period. And so during 2024, we had a total of 104,000 user sessions on our site. Well, that was down almost 30% from the previous year when we had 148,000 sessions. So we had fewer visitors to our website this year. And again, that's going to be reflective of maybe a lessening of focus on social media ads and online efforts. And then those numbers are reflected all the way through. Sessions with cart additions. Well, okay, that one was down significantly, 41%. Sessions that reached checkout, also down 41%. Sessions that completed checkout, down 27%. So that number is very reflective of the kind of the total decline in sessions. The conversion rate was up a bit. More of those who visited the site and put items in their cart purchased, but only slightly more, up 3%. And so, if you just looked at these numbers, you'd say, oh, well, that was not a great year for online sales. But again, the only way that this makes sense is that even though we were having fewer visitors,
I can mute this.
fewer purchases, the value of those purchases was higher. The items they were putting in their cart, the artwork that they were making purchases of, came in at a higher dollar value, which allowed us to increase the total value of sales generated. Okay, this chart is a
sorry, Jason.
kind of a breakdown of the price points. Oh, Jay, do I have you coming in?
I don't want to make any comment except someone is not muted.
Oh, let me.
Other than me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I got that. I was not hearing it, so I appreciate that. And don't hesitate to throw your hand. I can see your camera, so let me know if there's anything going wrong there. Okay, so now this chart is showing the price points of artwork sold and the contribution of those price points to our total sales. And so I did a little bit more of a breakdown this year. I dived in a little deeper and gave us more categories for those price points. And I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit between 2024 and 2023 so we can see where the differences are. But you can see right away that 36% of our total sales, total dollars generated, were generated by artwork that was valued between $0 and $250. And so a significant amount of our volume is coming from that lower price point. I've reflected on this every year for the last 5-6 years that this is an important change for us. That prior to that kind of transition where we added some items at a lower price point. Well, and I guess what I should say is that since we added those items, a lot of the growth we have seen has come from being able to provide items to customers who are spending lower values. And that was a significant shift in our business to consider doing that. And there had been some concern as we did it. And as we brought in some lower price points and maybe not even just thinking about bringing them in, but just shifting some of our focus and wall space to those lower price points, we were concerned that we might be cannibalizing higher price point sales. That if our customers were given the option to make purchases of items that were $150, $200, $300, and if we had a significant volume of them, that they might scratch their art buying itch at that lower price point and not end up making purchases of larger items. And so it certainly felt like a risk as we decided to do that. But what we found in making that shift was that instead of foreclosing opportunities to sell other artwork, we were instead opening the doors to many of the people who were coming through the gallery who previously had not had any options or at least not enough options to pull out their wallets and make a purchase or even to make maybe a first purchase with us. And so offering the lower price point brought a kind of flood of new customers to us. And it is certainly, I've encouraged for several years now for you as an artist to at least contemplate the option of adding some items at the lower end of the spectrum of your price point. And you could certainly be doing that by creating some smaller works. And if you're going to do that, I would encourage you to think about doing a fairly significant volume of those smaller works so that you have obviously at lower price points, we do have to be thinking in terms of volume. Or another option would be to think about adding some prints or, other items, printed items to your offerings that allow more customers to come in. And I've said this almost every year since we did that. And what we have found is that by offering these lower price points, we bring in some new customers who may only end up ever buying from us at the $150, $200, $250 price point. And we're glad to have those customers in volume. But what we have also found is that having those lower price points can serve as a gateway to a subset of our customers who just need to build a relationship with us. And then we now have the opportunity to cultivate that relationship. And eventually, we've seen a lot of those customers go from lower price points to higher price points. And sometimes it's taken, 2, 3, 4, 5 years for them to go from a $200 sale to a $2,000 or $5,000 sale. But the fact that they have purchased from us and are now on our mailing list has a tremendous value. And so again, just really worth considering there. Okay, so let's so those lower price points end up being significant, but let's hop to 2023. We'll go back and you'll notice that they were far more significant in 2023 than they were this year. That our here it was $100 to $250. Really, that should have been $0 to $250 as well. Although I don't know, do I have? No, I do not have lower than that. But almost half of our sales last year, and my highest category last year was the 10,000 to 20,000, and that made up about 4.5% of our total sales. We'll compare that to this year. If I can get myself back there. This year we have some sales in the 40 to 50,000 range, the 30 to 40,000 range, the 7,500 to 10,000, really the 5,000 and above. So if we grouped all of that together, the 5,000 to 50,000 compared to last year's, boy, it made a significant impact. So trend-wise, what we saw this year was that customers were coming back out to make purchases of larger items in higher volumes. We had more customers spending at the high end than we had had the previous year. And I guess I didn't run this number, but my suspicion is that that was where we saw most of the growth in sales this year. My low-end sales would have been fairly stable from 2023 to 2024, so they kind of serve as a bread and butter. But the high-end sales made a pretty significant difference. Here is the top customer spend over the last 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. And again, this is very much reflective of those high-end purchases. So last year, we had a customer. So each line here represents one customer and their spend during the year. And on the left, it's showing how many pieces of artwork they purchased. And on the right, it shows the total value of those purchases by that customer. Now, some of those customers might have been into the gallery one time and purchased, 4 or 5 pieces, while others may have been buying a piece every few months. This is showing their total spend during the year. And again, if you just specifically look at the difference between 23 and 24, notice how many more customers we had spending significant sums. Well, and you can just look at the fact that this whole column is taller. My lowest value here is 7,005 or 7,050. And I've got more of those customers kind of adding up to give us, a significant boost in total sales. And I can look at least at the first 4 or 5 on 2024, and I could tell you who each of those customers was, right? Because well, certainly number one, I obviously am going to remember someone who made a $45,000 purchase. That was the sculpture that I mentioned that was purchased in June. But even the ones that come after that, I can, it's names and memories of the experience of those customers purchasing. And boy, we sure, any one of these customers, they are going to end up getting more of our attention and more of our efforts to promote artwork and to send photos of newly available pieces. There is a real tendency among customers who spend more than $3,000-$4,000. There's a much higher likelihood that they're going to spend even more money with you through the year than your other customers. And so you want to be putting a lot of attention and marketing efforts into your relationship building with those customers. Okay. So here's one that we're going to look at a few charts here that are kind of breakdowns of format sales and also style. And I always get requests and questions about this. Which sells better, sculpture or paintings, contemporary or traditional? And so just to scratch everybody's curiosity, I like to throw these numbers up, but I want to issue some caveats before we spend time talking about them. And that is, first and foremost, that this is a reflection of not of broader trends in the market. This is a reflection of Xanadu Gallery's sales experience, right? Because we have a very particular breakdown of work that is shown in the gallery. This is going to reflect that my gallery tends to lean in certain directions stylistically, tends to lean in certain directions in terms of format. And so, I would just say this has very limited applicability to the broader market. The other caveat I have to give is that if you were to hop over to our website, xanadugallery.com, and go to the artists page, you would have a hard time categorizing some of the artists that I show, even here, breaking it down between wall art and sculpture. Because I have some artists whose work hangs on the wall, but it is absolutely, it is sculptural work, three-dimensional. And I have some artists whose work goes on a pedestal that is painted. And so I just had to do the best I can here to break it down in a way that makes sense to me. I categorize those artists, and that's how we end up here. And the same will be true when I show you the difference between our traditional and contemporary artists. Again, you might have a hard time deciding which artists fall where. But if I look at wall art versus sculpture in 2023, last year, it was almost a third versus 2/3. Well, this year, I even went back to 2022 here. 38-61, so close to the same, but here we are again, and this one flipped the positions around, but again, 1/3, 2/3. Excuse me, I got a little cough going here. And again, this is just going to be more of a reflection. Does this reflect what sells better in the market or the percentages? Not necessarily, although I do suspect that there is, people tend, when they think about buying art, they might think a little bit more about paintings and art that goes on their walls and have more space to display that than they do sculptural works. We find that even our customers who buy a significant amount of sculpture, they typically started their art collecting with wall art, paintings and pastels and so on and so forth. And then as their collections kind of filled up, then they start thinking in 3 dimensions. And so I think there are some natural tendencies reflected here. But there it is. 36% was sculpture this year. And again, a big part of that this year was a couple of larger larger dollar value items that sold. It would not have been this high without those items, but interesting that our numbers kind of stick fairly steady year over year. Here is traditional versus contemporary, and this is for this year. 66% traditional, 33% contemporary. And again, if you go to our website, you'll see that it's probably a little hard to break that down. And my traditional versus other galleries traditional, I don't have any, kind of European impressionism or anything like that. But, again, I kind of looked at it as traditional would mean that there was a landscape or it was a sculpture that was a figure, it was representational. And the contemporary was more about the design or the concept behind the work. And so for us, it's about, again, about a third versus 2/3. Okay. Here we go. I didn't put any names on this, but this is the total percentage of sales by individual artists in our gallery. And what you see here is that my top selling artist made up almost 30% of our total sales. The number 2 was 13, 12, 10, 7, almost 5. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 artists made up 3/4 of our total sales. Let's think about the implications of that for a minute. You can see in the other third or the other quarter remaining that there are a bunch of artists who did not have, tremendously significant sales for the gallery and likely for themselves. I would not want to be in business without that quarter of our business. It's an important quarter, but certainly the artists who are in the 3/4 who made up a significant part of our sales, if we think of the implications of that, maybe they don't need to be showing in quite as many galleries. They're able to focus on just maybe a few galleries and getting them a significant volume of work. The artists who are in the other part may find that in some galleries they're in the top 3/4 or top half of the sales. But it's likely that they need to be in more galleries and more venues. I will say that this year, 2 of the artists who would be in that top 3/4, 2 of them were not in our top 3/4 last year. They moved up. We saw some significant sales increase for those artists. And this last year, Kristen and I, my director, put quite a bit of effort into increasing communication with all of our artists and talking about what we were seeing the most response to in their work, and reflecting, sending them kind of reports and updates on what had been the most popular in selling over the last year. Because what we kind of realized at the end of last year and even going into spring this year was that we were getting some significant inventory from artists that maybe was outside of what we would think of as their most sellable work. And this is a balancing act for a gallery owner to kind of think about, how do I give constructive feedback and input without seeming too demanding and without stepping on an artist's creative spirit? And I always want to be very careful about that. I've said it here many times that I feel I'm going to be most successful and excited about selling what you are excited and passionate about. But having said that, we saw very clear results this year and increases in sales for those artists who responded to that feedback. And maybe your gallery or your venues aren't doing this for you, but you could do it for yourself. Look back over what has sold over the last year and pay attention to what subject matter seemed to garner the most sales. What sizes, formats, and even though some of that is going to fall outside the bounds of trends, and there's no guarantee that doing more of what sold will generate more sales. There is at least some likelihood that that will occur. And we saw evidence of that this year in that we were able to increase the sales for a number of our artists by giving them that very specific feedback. And the way we couched it was, we're not trying to tell you what to create, but we just wanted to make you aware this is what we're seeing. These are the sales that we saw in terms of style and subject matter and size. If you were to ask us what we might like to have more of, it would be more of this. And those efforts definitely resulted in more sales for those artists. Here's the other side of the equation. This is the breakdown. If we have revenue coming in, this is the breakdown of how it goes back out, where we made spends this year. And so you can see Xanadu Gallery's largest expense is in wages and salaries. The second largest, and this is a significant change over the last 5 years, is that advertising now makes up 27% of our total spend per year. Reflective of a shift in focus and efforts and almost all of that advertising spend, almost all of it. We do have a couple of small print ads that we do. We also do our catalog, which is an ongoing source of advertising revenue. But a big portion of the change in spending is that we're spending more on social media. Don't want to spend too much time here, but obviously the other big one for us is going to be rent, having our space to show in. And then you'll say dues and subscriptions. You spend almost 8% of your revenue on subscriptions. That's actually reflective. That is our spend on our Shopify website. And Shopify handles our shipping as well. And so in our accounting system is pretty automated. It just puts all of the Shopify spend in there. And so that 8.4% is actually reflective of both the fees we pay to have our website, but largely also the spending on shipping and delivery of artwork. The other things are kind of what you would expect: some postage and delivery, rent, repairs and maintenance, telephone, utilities. Those are all kind of small percentages. It's the wages and salaries, advertising, and rent that make up the bulk of our expenses as a business. Okay, so what does 2025 hold? And as I always do in December, I had a year-end meeting with our CPA, and he always wants to take a look at how things have been going. He wants to do some tax projections so that we can plan for that. And inevitably, about 45 minutes into the conversation, it's always an hour-long meeting, 45 minutes in, he will ask me, now, what do you expect for 2025? How do you think things will look in 2025? And so in essence, he's asking me to pull out a crystal ball and tell him what I expect for the future. And every single time I'm like, Michael, I have no idea. How do I know what's going to happen in the coming year? And I always try and give him an idea of what I think might happen, and almost always it's wrong. The years that I think things are going to be up, they're down. When I think they might be tough, they're better. predicting that I can tell you I could not be a fortune teller because I just don't have any clear picture. However, I know what we're going to be doing, and I know where our efforts are going to be focused in this coming year. And certainly it's going to be a lot of the more of the fundamentals. I've already mentioned that I'm refocusing, that this exercise of looking at the numbers of this last year is refocusing me on our social media efforts. We will continue to give more feedback to our artists in an effort to increase sales artist by artist. We've brought on, I should say, some new artists in the gallery over 2024. So we're going to be cultivating those relationships both with the artists, but also with introducing their artwork to our collectors. And so there's just going to be a lot of effort put into doing more of what we have been doing. As I was thinking about kind of goals and plans for 2025, I have a little, I use an app called Workflowy to brainstorm and kind of think and jot things down. And as I kind of listed all the things that I wanted to be focusing on, there wasn't anything really radical there. Not going to be any major radical changes to our efforts this year. I guess my word for the year would be redoubling. That we're going to be really just doubling down on what we've been doing that works to continue to build momentum and move things forward. All right, I have droned on and showered you with numbers for long enough. Let me pull you into the conversation. What questions do you have about the numbers that we've seen this year? What have you experienced in 2024? Have you done your rundown? And what is your crystal ball saying about 2025? Let me start with Carol, and you can ask questions by clicking on the hand icon or just throw your hand up in front of your camera if you've got your camera going. But let me start with Carol, and then I'll go to June.
Hey there, Jason. Thanks so much for this. Very informative as always. So two slides stuck in my brain for a little bit more. One was that you said that you were not able to dive a little deeper into social media this year because some things got away from you. Then the other slide was when you were talking about your top customers. And I'm curious if you track somehow the time you spend on those higher dollar top customers and how you account for that.
Yes, so we don't necessarily have, and it would be interesting to have it. I'm afraid it would just be too cumbersome to manage. It's somewhat chaotic in a gallery environment that you're working with one customer at the same time another one's walking through the front door, and you're in, you're out, you're emailing, and so we don't necessarily have time tracking per se. Some of those top customers, just the logistics of having some of those sales happen, there might have been some negotiation that occurred. Some logistical questions that had to be answered in terms of delivery and payment and all of those kind of things. And so you do end up spending some time with those customers. But I think we could go to the other chart where you saw, kind of the breakdown of the price points and the total number of sales that were made in there. We end up spending a lot of times. It's interesting. You end up spending as much time on a $300 sale as you do on a $30,000 sale. That does present a challenge. You've got to be careful about balancing your effort. And like I say, we want to, on the back end, give more attention to those customers where we have that potential to really see things increase. June, let me go to you.
Okay, I was wondering where you had your highest selling artists. I'm assuming that was dollar amount. So
Correct.
What I'm wondering with that, was their price point higher, or did they sell more pieces at a lower price point? Because
Yes.
that was
Okay. So the number one artist, I'm not gonna, we wouldn't have to beat around the bush very much to know. I've mentioned Spirit Tiles here before. We've seen them. They are very popular. They sell at a high volume. That's my number one selling artist for the last 6 or 7 years. And those are items that are selling at now at $200 per spirit tile. That's the number one artist. So obviously for that particular artist, it was all about volume. You know, several thousand of those spirit tiles selling every year. The number 2 and number 3 artist, though, number 2 was also a bit of volume, but her price points are between $1,800 and $3,000. And so the total dollar value was kind of a balance of volume and value. And my number 3 artist was a significantly lower volume, but higher price point. And so what I think that our takeaway from that could be that we can build success either way. I'm not suggesting that, hey, everyone here should just give up on, you know, $3,000 and above sales and just start doing small items. Because there are, you know, there's a completely other unique set of challenges that come if you are to shift completely to volume. And Houston Liu, who does the spirit tiles, he has, I don't know what the total number is, but he has, in essence, a bit of a factory going where he has artisans working for him, and his biggest issues are not creative, they are managerial. You know, I don't think that necessarily many of us here want to take on those particular kinds of challenges. And so a lot of the takeaways and lessons we might discuss in the weekly sessions and in the lessons are really not focused on that super high volume. It's more focused on how can we increase the volume of our moderately to higher priced artwork. And all of the other artists, I will say that, you know, that top 3 quarters, only one of them is a high volume, low price. All of the others are moderately to higher priced. So, you know, I think that's where most of us want to be spending our effort. But that doesn't mean that we can't see some benefits to adding some bread and butter sales at the smaller, lower end. Gay, let me go to you. Thank you for those questions.
Mine's a sort of observation. It was fascinating listening to you, and that is what I've observed is 2 extremes in my own stream of selling this year, small or large, with
Yeah.
nothing in between. It was like, I'm going to go for like, my gallery won't let me sell anything less than $250, and that's for like something that's 5 by 5 inches or something. So I'm down there, so those go, okay, and then there's a big gap. And of course, earlier this year, I told you, well, 2024 saw me sell 2 of the largest paintings I've ever sold. So I was fascinated to see how it broke down for you.
Yes.
So here I am thinking, well, what shall I do now? And, you know, then I go to what you said about the culture, you know, helping you, cultivating your artists. And I listen to what my gallerist says to me.
Yep.
She's not telling me what to paint, but she's saying, boy, if you do this, they'll like it. And it's my own stuff. Emphasize this and not that. So this has been very helpful to me to get a grip on what actually might be going out there.
Good, good.
The
Well,
huge difference between $250 and
yes,
$7,000.
that's right. We do want to be careful about that,
Right.
though, because, and even we have to be very careful about this in that you can take some, you know, kind of anecdotal data points and you can say, well, I had these 2 huge sales and I sold a lot of smaller stuff. We still are subject to a bit the vagaries, you know, when we're only dealing with some, you know, somewhere between maybe 10 or 20 or 30 buyers over the course of a year, right? Did we sell 30, 40, 50, even 50, 100, even if we were selling 100 pieces over the last year, that's still a very small sample size. And I would just say, you know, part of the insight that we try to reflect back to our artists is that, hey, we want to keep a range. Even if we're selling mostly small and mostly large, we do still want to have some of those moderately sized pieces available. And who knows, maybe next year, Gay, you'll find, well, oddly this year, it was all 30 by 40s that went out the door. Who can explain it? But if you're producing work that you're, you know, again, is consistent in terms of your style and subject matter, and the quality is constantly improving, and you're keeping up the volume of production and you're getting enough exposure, those are the ingredients that ultimately mix together to create strong ongoing sales. Other questions? Ken, hop right in. Oh, hold on, Ken, you are muted. There we go.
Like I said, I hesitate a bit because of my ignorance, but for
No, that's why we're here. We love the question. There, you know, sure.
You know what I'm gonna-
Is a stupid question, but we love them.
well, in your one of your charts, and you're saying how your biggest expense was your employees, and I'm just trying to figure out what the relationship between the artist and the gallery is. Why isn't I would have thought that what would you call it, payment,
Ken,
commission?
thank you so much for bringing this up, because if you just looked at that, you didn't even see artist payments
Yeah,
on there, right?
Right.
Thank you. Yes, clearly. And so those numbers were operating expenses, whereas artist commissions would be considered a cost of goods sold. So it's a different category from an accounting standpoint. It's a different category of expenses, and you're exactly right. We know that gallery commissions, the artist gallery split is either 50-50 or, you know, with some galleries it might be 60-40, but yeah, 50% of total revenue that we generated would have been going back to artists. It just didn't show in that chart because that chart was only reflecting operating expenses, day-to-day operational expenses.
So one more question, if I may.
Absolutely.
I've been doing this for 5 years now, but what I've discovered last year was my sales went up, but my expenses went up a precipitous rate, which made my revenue actually lower.
Yeah, your profits.
Does anybody else experience that too?
Yeah, certainly, no doubt that inflation is having impact in every corner. But you know, if you think about what could be happening, I expect, Ken, when you say expenses, are you talking about shipping expenses?
Yes.
You're talking about material costs?
Yes.
Those kinds of expenses are going up, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so you know, there are some things we can do to try and offset some of that. You know, hopefully as we become better at shipping, and we've had sessions here where we talked about you know, buying materials in bulk and you know, getting bulk shipping rates and that kind of thing. So there's some things that we can do to mitigate that. But at the end of the day, we want to be doing the accounting so we can see what the percentages are. Did my total percentage of expense go up? Or was it just that because my total revenue went up, also my expenses went up, and they went up proportionally? And Ken, it sounds like maybe you feel like they went up more than proportionally, that you know, a greater percentage of your total revenue was going towards expenses, and your profits were not as strong as they had been previously. And you know, we do want to be working on that and paying attention to the bottom line. I would say, though, early in our careers, yes, we should be aware of that. We should be focusing on it. But I would say that to build a better base of success, really our focus should be on just getting as much exposure and as much sales going to build a baseline for us, and to build a foundation of our business. And as we get the sales levels up, then we can start focusing on what we can do to be more efficient and to get our expenses in line. You know, if you kind of think of an order of operations, if we spend too much time focusing on bringing our costs down, we can get sucked into a rabbit hole where we're now leaving our sales efforts and our marketing efforts on the side, and we want to be sure not to be doing that. So certainly further conversation to be had in that area. As always happens with these sessions, we've run out of time, and I'm sure there's a lot more to discuss here. We'll be having an open Q&A next Friday. I would encourage you, like I said, I'm going to post a PDF copy of these slides. I'm sure also that as you're kind of thinking about this, you know, maybe other questions will crop up. I would encourage you, if you haven't done it, to go ahead and sit down and do a reflection on last year, look over the numbers, and make sure that you kind of know where your sales are and where your expenses are. And then let's send me those questions next week, and we'll dive in. I will mention that I received a couple of submitted questions for the Q&A. I'll roll those over. If you submitted a question today, and obviously I didn't get to it because we were talking all about sales, I will make sure that those come into the first of the deck for next week. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for your input. And like I say, we'll look forward to continuing this